Today we are tying a fox squirrel emerger fly created by Hans Weilenmann out of Holland. This fly uses a partridge hook K2BY with a turned up eye, and we'll be using a size 12 hook today. We're using black thread, and we'll start our thread about a third of the way back down the shank to get it started, and then wrap all the way down to the curve of the hook. And since this is emerger, the first thing we're going to tie in is the shuck he just came out of. So we're using some olive tan wool. We're going to use just a small piece of wool here, and we want that piece of wool to be about equal to just a little bit more than the shank of the hook. We'll tie that in back here. I'd like to give it 2 soft wraps to get it started. Make sure I've got it on top of the shank of the hook. Tie in there. Hold it down. I want to take a couple of wraps and go under it. Just hold it up a little bit. And once I've got it in place, that's good. The next thing we're going to tie in is going to be a piece of small copper wire. And we'll tie that in on the far side of my hook shank. Because when I wrap this, I'm going to counter wrap it in relation to how I'm wrapping my thread now. I want to make sure this gets all the way back to where I tied in our tail. And we're going to take another piece of the olive tan wool, and with that we will create our body by dubbing this onto our hook. We'll use this and just spin it right onto our thread here. We're going to wrap this up the hook shank, keeping it nice and tight. Pull my extra off here. I'm going to tie this in right here. I'll trim my excess off. Then I'll counter wrap with my copper wire. Trying to keep even wraps as I come forward. Tie it off right here. I'm going to pull this tight, hold my thread, and use the helicopter method to take my wire and break it off. The next thing we want to tie in is the back of our thorax, which is made out of peacock herls. I have 3 of those here. I'm tying in right here. Get on them, raise them up to get under them, and back on top. And then I can cut these pieces off here. Now, in his original pattern, he used squirrel right here to do that. And what we're going to do, we're going to use a partridge feather to create our legs. And we're going to come in here just like this and come in right off the top of it. I'm going to lay it right across the top real carefully like here. I'm going to pinch that in place and give myself a couple of soft wraps around to hold it in place and make sure I've got the legs on either side where we want to have them. Okay. Once I have those in place there, I'm going to give myself 2 more wraps in to hold it. Come down under it and back on top. Now I can cut that tag end off. The thorax is made out of hare's ear dubbing. I'm going to use just a tiny bit of that here. This doesn't take much right in here. Get it started. Add just a little bit more of that. Probably going to be too much. Take my extra off of that. I'm going to do a locking thread there. Now I'm going to bring my peacock herl forward over the top of that and tie that in right here. Lift up and go under it. Back on top one time. Then I can take the peacock herl off. And then I can build a head here. Once I have the head built up, I'll come back in and add just a little bit of glue on my thread. Just to hold it so it gets down in place when I apply a whip finish to it. And there I have a whip finish on it. I can cut my thread, and there I have the Squirrel Emerger by Hans Weilenmann. Thank you very much for joining us today.